At first glance, it resembled nothing more than a flashlight or a short section of pipe. About 7 inches of dark metal tubing with a rounded end and a strap meant to secure it to the wrist. Anyone spotting it would likely assume it was a harmless piece of equipment, perhaps a tool carried by an electrician or engineer. That assumption would be deadly wrong. Hidden inside that ordinary-looking tube was a brutal close combat weapon. A lead-weighted kosh capable of shattering a skull, a 24-inch length of piano wire designed to strangle a man in seconds, and a spring-loaded stiletto blade that snapped into action with a sharp flick of the wrist. 3 lethal methods concealed within a single device. According to surviving records, fewer than 24 were ever produced. This is the story of the McLaughlin Pescuit close combat weapon, one of the most unusual and ingenious tools developed by Britain's Special Operations Executive during the Second World War. The year was 1941. Britain stood virtually alone against Nazi Germany. France had fallen in just 6 weeks. Norway was lost. The Low Countries were occupied. Greece and Yugoslavia had collapsed under the force of blitzkrieg. Across an enormous stretch of Europe, from the Arctic Circle down to the Mediterranean, German forces stood guard. Bridges, rail hubs, ammunition depots, coastal radar stations, thousands of strategic targets were protected by hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If Britain's saboteurs were to succeed, those guards had to be removed quietly. In London, a new organization was figuring out how to make that possible. The Special Operations Executive, formed in July 1940, had received a simple but explosive directive from Winston Churchill: set Europe ablaze. That mission meant widespread sabotage. It meant creating resistance movements from scratch. It meant turning ordinary civilians into trained operatives. And, when required, it meant killing without sound. SOE agents faced a harsh reality. How do you remove an enemy sentry without alerting everyone nearby? A gunshot, even from a suppressed pistol, could carry farther than expected. A physical struggle risked giving the guard time to shout, fire, or call for help. The act had to be immediate, silent, and absolute. One moment, the German soldier would be standing at his post, rifle hanging from his shoulder, perhaps thinking of home. The next, he would be lying lifeless in the dark while the SOE operative moved on toward the objective. No alarms, no raised suspicions, just silence. Existing weapons addressed parts of the problem. The famous Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife, designed by William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes based on their experience with the Shanghai Municipal Police, was devastating at close range. Its razor-sharp 7.5-inch double-edged blade could slip between ribs and reach the heart. Fairbairn himself taught the method: approach from behind, clamp a hand over the mouth and nose, and drive the blade upward into the kidney or slash across the throat. But a knife demanded extreme proximity. If the initial strike failed, if the sentry turned at the wrong instant, the attacker risked a desperate fight with a trained soldier. The garrote offered another answer. A simple loop of wire or cord pulled tight around the neck could end a life quickly and without noise.
Once the wire cut into the neck, the victim had only seconds of awareness, perhaps 10, 15 at most. There was no opportunity to shout, no chance to mount any real resistance. The garrote was brutally efficient. Its weakness, however, was direction. It only worked from behind. If the target turned at the wrong instant, if a boot snapped a twig or a breath was heard, the attacker was suddenly holding a thin wire while facing a man armed with a rifle and bayonet. The kosh offered a different approach, a heavy, weighted striking weapon. It could drop a man with a single blow to the head. British police had relied on such tools for decades: leather sleeves packed with lead shot or solid metal rods wrapped for grip. A hard swing to the temple or the base of the skull could end a fight instantly. But not every strike was perfect. A poorly placed blow might leave the enemy stunned rather than unconscious, still able to yell, still able to fire a weapon. Even when successful, a fallen body might groan or twitch, drawing the attention of a nearby patrol. As a result, SOE operatives often carried multiple tools at once: a Fairbairn Sykes knife on the belt, a garrote hidden in a pocket, a kosh tucked up a sleeve. But night operations were chaotic. Reaching for the wrong weapon or hesitating for even a second could prove fatal. A sentry might turn unexpectedly, a patrol route could change, a dog might start barking. Each lost moment increased the risk of discovery, and behind enemy lines, discovery meant death. Two men believed they had found a better answer. In 1938, John Edward Peskett became managing director of Cogswell and Harrison Limited. Founded in 1770 and based at 108 Piccadilly, the firm was one of London's most respected gunmakers. They produced fine shotguns for wealthy sportsmen hunting on the Scottish moors and had supplied military contracts for generations. Peskett commanded access to master craftsmen capable of levels of precision that few wartime workshops could equal. When the military required a device that demanded absolute accuracy and strict secrecy, Cogswell and Harrison were well positioned to deliver. His partner in this effort was far more unconventional. Sidney Temple Leopold McLaughlin, born in 1884 in Stepney, was the brother of Victor McLaughlin, the Oscar-winning Hollywood actor known for The Informer and numerous John Ford westerns. While Victor found fame on screen, Sidney followed a far stranger path. He claimed the title of World Jiu-Jitsu Champion after a London bout in 1907. He published combat manuals such as Modernized Jiu-Jitsu Lessons and, during the war, Armed Attack and Defense for Commandos, Home Guard and civilians. He asserted he had served in the Boer War and toured internationally teaching his own bayonet fighting system.
By 1944, he held the rank of lieutenant in the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve. Yet McLaughlin's reputation was deeply controversial. His own brother publicly labeled him a fraud as early as 1911. Later historians have described him as a habitual exaggerator, if not an outright fabricator. Still, his ideas about close-quarters combat attracted attention. Someone within British intelligence saw enough value in his theories to grant him a commission and attach his name to a classified weapons program. Together, the meticulous manufacturer and the self-styled combat expert envisioned something entirely new. They proposed a single device that combined all three methods of silent killing: the kosh, the garrote, and the dagger. One compact, wrist-mounted weapon that could be used in any situation without hesitation. British patent GB 559747A, filed on August 10, 1942, formally described the concept under the bland title Improvements in or Relating to Close Combat Weapons. The patent outlined a combination of two or more close combat tools, such as a dagger and a strangulation cord, integrated with a club or kosh. Clinical language for a ruthlessly practical instrument designed for one purpose alone: killing silently at arm's length. According to surviving examples and auction records, the finished weapon measured roughly 7 inches when closed, about the length of a man's hand from wrist to fingertip. With the blade extended, the weapon measured just over 12 inches in length. Its cylindrical body was finished in a dark parkerized steel, specifically chosen to eliminate reflections under moonlight. The main tube measured approximately 5 5/8 inches long, with a maximum diameter of just under 1 inch. According to collector documentation, the total weight fell between 500 and 600 grams, heavy enough to deliver decisive blows, yet light enough to be worn on the forearm for long periods without causing fatigue. The kosh assembly sat at the top of the device. A dense spherical weight made from cast lead and steel, roughly 1 3/8 inches across, was mounted so it could rotate at the end of the cylinder. When swung downward, this concentrated mass was intended to deliver disabling force to the skull. By placing the weight at the end of the weapon's length, the designers effectively increased striking power through leverage. This weighted ball also served a secondary function. Rotating it allowed the internal garrote wire to be wound or released. Surviving examples and auction listings indicate that roughly 24 inches of piano wire were wrapped around an internal stem connected to the ball. Piano wire was selected for its exceptional tensile strength and minimal elasticity. Unlike softer cords, it would not stretch under pressure, ensuring the force applied translated directly into crushing constriction rather than lost energy. One end of the wire was permanently anchored inside the tube. The free end exited through a small aperture near the top, fitted with a finger ring. To deploy it, the operator loosened a locking screw beneath the weighted ball, pulled the wire to its full length, and, once finished, could rewind it by rotating the sphere. The length allowed an operative to approach a sentry from behind, loop the wire around the neck, cross the wrists behind the victim's head, and apply fatal pressure within seconds. At the opposite end of the device was the blade, a 5.5-inch stiletto, narrow and spike-like, designed for thrusting rather than slashing, rested inside the hollow body. Its release system was deliberately simple. A spring-loaded button on the side controlled a lateral catch connected to the blade. Press the button, angle the weapon downward, and a sharp flick of the wrist allowed gravity to slide the blade out where it locked into place with a distinct click. This gravity-assisted deployment ensured reliability even with wet or blood-slicked hands, in complete darkness and under the intense stress of close combat. The entire unit was secured to the forearm with a heavy-duty webbing strap and split ring. It could be concealed beneath a jacket sleeve, invisible to casual observation, yet instantly reachable regardless of what the operative was holding. Before continuing with how the weapon performed in the field, if you're enjoying this deep dive into British wartime engineering, consider subscribing. It takes only a moment, costs nothing, and helps support the channel. Now, back to the McLaughlin Pesquet. Development began around 1941, with a prototype completed prior to the formal patent filing. This early version, which appeared at auction in 2022 with provenance linked to the Wilkinson Sword tool room, exposed several serious flaws that had to be resolved before any production run could proceed. The weighted ball was simply too light to function effectively as a kosh. Striking power depends on both mass and speed. Reduce the mass, and greater velocity is required to achieve the same impact. Greater velocity demands a wider swing, and a wider swing gives the target more time to react. The blade was also inadequate. Measuring only about 8 centimeters, roughly 3 inches, it was too short for consistently lethal thrusts. Part of the Fairbairn-Sykes knife's effectiveness came from its length. A 7.5-inch blade could reach vital organs from multiple angles. A 3-inch spike often could not. Most dangerously, the wire spool was undersized. The tight curvature caused the garrote wire to kink during deployment. Under tension, a kinked wire is on the verge of failure. A garrote snapping mid-use would almost certainly doom the operative. The production model corrected the flaws found in the prototype. At Cogswell and Harrison, Pesquet's craftsmen increased both the size and mass of the weighted ball to improve striking effectiveness. The blade was lengthened to a combat-viable 5.5 inches. The internal garrote system was re-engineered with a wider spool to eliminate stress points that had caused wire failures. Despite these improvements, production remained extremely limited. Specialist dealers, collector archives, and small arms review consistently described the McLaughlin Pesquet weapon as exceptionally rare. Most estimates suggest that only around 24 examples were ever manufactured. Several surviving pieces examined by auction houses carry stamped markings and serial numbers, including references indicating patent pending status. One known example reportedly featured markings on its wrist strap that collectors believe may indicate issuance to the 1st Special Service Brigade, though such claims should always be verified against original photographs and documentation. Intended users likely included SOE operatives, and following the United States entry into the war in December 1941, members of the American Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. Some accounts also associate the weapon with the famed 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade, which conducted operations in Italy and southern France. The device was issued with both its wrist strap and a dedicated belt scabbard, allowing it to be concealed under clothing while remaining quickly accessible. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Despite its ingenuity, no confirmed evidence of operational use has surfaced. Searches through accessible SOE mission reports, post-action files, and veteran memoirs have yielded no references to the weapon being employed in the field. While examples appear in museum collections and auction catalogs, they are notably absent from combat records. This absence could reflect incomplete archives or undocumented use at the unit level, but based on available evidence, the Maclaglen Pesket appears never to have been used in actual operations. Robert G. Siegel, writing in Small Arms Review, offered a blunt conclusion. There is no proof that the weapon ever saw combat, let alone accounted for a confirmed kill. While these specialized tools were produced for operatives and acquired by them, they appear to have functioned more as curiosities or souvenirs than as frontline equipment.
Several factors likely contributed to this outcome. First was sheer scarcity. With only about 24 produced, the weapon could have equipped fewer than 25 individuals across SOE and OSS, organizations that deployed thousands of agents worldwide. Timing was another issue. By the time the patent was officially published in March 1944, SOE had already standardized its preferred arsenal. Operatives trusted the Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife, produced in the millions. They relied on conventional garrots and suppressed firearms such as the well-rod pistol. Introducing a complex, unfamiliar hybrid weapon late in the war offered little advantage over tools that were already proven. There was also the problem of compromise. By combining 3 functions into one device, each component suffered. The Kosh was smaller and lighter than a proper blackjack. The stiletto blade was thinner and less robust than a Fairbairn-Sykes. The garrote wire, wound onto a compact internal spool, lacked the leverage handles of a dedicated strangling cord. Each element worked, but none matched the effectiveness of a purpose-built alternative. One military historian has suggested a more troubling reason. The weapon's unusual and unmistakably covert design posed a serious risk if discovered. Unlike a standard fighting knife, which could pass as ordinary military equipment, the Maclaglen Pesquet's unique configuration would immediately mark its owner as an assassin, exactly the kind of individual the Gestapo would single out for interrogation. As for enemy equivalents, the Maclaglen Pesquet stood alone. Germany never fielded a true multi-function close combat weapon of this type. Their most comparable tool, the Fallschirmjäger gravity knife, was primarily a utility implement for paratroopers, not a dedicated instrument of silent killing.
German SS and SA daggers, by contrast, were largely ceremonial objects rather than practical tools for combat. When it came to silent killing, British design was unmatched. American OSS weapons followed a different philosophy. The V-42 stiletto, issued exclusively to the 1st Special Service Force, was an exceptional fighting knife, but it was still just a knife. More unusual was the Sedgley OSS glove pistol, a single-shot .38 special firearm worn on the back of the hand and fired by striking the target. While ingenious in concept, it proved deeply impractical, with production estimates ranging from as few as 50 to perhaps 200 units. Even among this eclectic group, the Maclaglen Pesquet struggled to stand out. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife became legendary, remaining in ceremonial service with British commandos and Royal Marines to this day. The well-rod suppressed pistol, developed at SOE's Station 9, delivered truly quiet lethality, around 73 decibels, softer than a closing door, and saw confirmed operational use from Norway to Burma. When the Special Operations Executive was dissolved in January 1946, its more unusual inventions faded into obscurity. With such a tiny production run, the Maclaglen Pesquet all but disappeared from public view. The few surviving examples have since become highly prized by collectors. In December 2022, a prototype sold at auction through Bishop & Miller for around $900. Marked production models now command prices between $5,000 and $7,500 from specialist dealers. With only about 24 ever produced and an unknown number surviving, authentic examples rank among the rarest weapons of the Second World War. Sidney Maclaglen died in Newton Abbot, Devon in 1951. His wartime role was largely forgotten. His brother Victor continued a successful Hollywood career into the late 1950s, winning acclaim on screen, while Sidney's name slipped quietly into obscurity. John Pesquet remained with Cogswell and Harrison, eventually buying the company back from Inter Armco in 1963 and leading it into the mid-1960s. The prestigious gunmaker still exists today, though it no longer produces assassination tools for British intelligence.
The most accessible public display of the Maclaglen Pesquet can be found at the Secret Army exhibition in Bowley, Hampshire, which maintains a permanent collection dedicated to SOE operations. The Imperial War Museum also holds extensive SOE material, and specialist publications continue to document the weapon for historians and collectors who recognize its unusual place in the history of clandestine warfare. The device saw no post-war service. British intelligence did not adopt it during the Cold War, favoring proven designs like the well rod and more conventional tools. The 3-in-1 concept inspired no known successors. It remained a singular experiment, a path never pursued again. 7 inches of dark metal, 3 methods of killing, perhaps 24 ever made, none confirmed to have taken a life. The Maclaglen Pesquet represents something deeper about Britain's secret war. When conventional solutions fell short, British engineers explored every possible alternative. Some, like the well rod, proved devastatingly effective. Others, such as explosive rats and coal bombs, achieved their goals in unexpected ways. And some, like the Maclaglen Pesquet, remained elegant ideas that never quite succeeded in practice. Yet that willingness to experiment, to innovate under pressure, to combine ideas in search of advantage, defined British special operations engineering throughout the war. The weapon survives today as a symbol of creative desperation and dark ingenuity, born from a time when Britain's clandestine forces tested every imaginable way to kill silently, efficiently, and without warning. That ordinary-looking cylinder strapped to a wrist, hiding 3 ways to kill, may never have claimed a life, but it stands as proof of how far British engineers were prepared to go.